back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing two different eyeshadow looks using the new Mini Glam palette from Natasha Denona. Now, I always get excited about these mini palettes because truthfully they are my favorite from Natasha Denona. I'm not always a fan of the big pans only because I don't love every formula from Natasha Denona. I love all of the mini palettes that I have. So I have the Mini Nudes palette, which is my favorite. I also have the Mini Star palette, which is also my favorite. I can't pick between them, so don't even ask me to. And then I also have the Mini Gold, and all three of these palettes I have absolutely loved. When I saw this come up on Trend Mood, I knew I needed to get my hands on it. Only because, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm starting to really love like a cool toned eyeshadow look. And this just screams cool tones. So in the video, I'm going to be breaking down the palette. I'm going to be doing two different eyeshadow looks with this palette. And then I'm also going to be doing swatch comparisons to the three palettes that I just talked about. So that's what we're going to be playing with in today's video. I also have these three palettes from the new Fenty launch. These are called the Snap Shadows. I did a poll on my Instagram and also here in my community center asking which review you guys would like to see first. Majority of you guys voted for the Natasha Denona first, so that's what we're doing in today's video. My next video will be of these three palettes. I have palette number 5, palette number 3, and palette number 1. So be on the look for that video coming very soon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the two tutorials that I did creating two different looks with the palette. Then I will get into the swatches and I will get into my final thoughts at the end. So without further ado, let's jump right into look number 1. Okay, so I got this cool toned beauty in my collection yesterday. It arrived. So I don't have any concealer or anything on in case I get any fallout. I just put some foundation on, got my brows on, and then I put some P. Louise eyeshadow base down. And I have all new clean brushes. It is a Christmas miracle. Okay, first things first, I'm gonna take a pencil. This is from Urban Decay. This is in the shade Whiskey. I'm gonna go right at the base of my lashes. Kind of create a little bit of a wing. This will more than likely get covered with, you know, whatever eyeshadow I'm using, but I'm just putting this on as a base. I'm going to put it on the upper waterline as well. So then I'm going to take my Refer number 13 brush. I'm going to grab this shade right here. I'm curious to see what this is going to look like. You guys know I'm a medium with like a golden undertone. So I'm curious to see what this shade is going to look like on my skin tone. Is it going to give me any depth in the crease? You know, I'm just kind of curious. Am I going to be able to see it? I know those of you that have a lighter skin tone are probably going to be able to see it best, but those who have like a medium to darker skin tone, I just don't know that this is going to show up. But if you have a darker skin tone, this is going to be a nice shade to kind of blend and buff edges when you're using the dark shade. So I do feel like this palette, just by looking at it and swatching it, I feel like it's dark skin friendly. I really do. The actual shimmer shades would be beautiful on darker skin. So that is definitely a plus when it comes to this palette. So basically I'm kind of mapping out my crease and it kind of gave me a tiny bit of depth, but not a lot, just a little bit. Now I'm gonna grab this shade using the same brush and I'm gonna kind of just go over top of what I did. So I've just dipped back into the dark and now I'm just kind of slowly buffing this into place, keeping it here on this outer corner. So now I'm just going to take a clean brush and kind of buff and blend those together. It is sticking right here to my, I don't know if it's sticking to the eyeshadow base or what, but I'm struggling trying to get that to buff out. So I'm going to take a clean brush like this that's a little bit stiffer and kind of go in and start trying to buff that out. But it's just sticking. I don't know if you can see it, but it's sticking like right there. So I'm going to wipe my brush off and I'm going to go into this first shade right here. And I'm going to use that to hopefully try to blend and buff that out. grab this brush from Sigma. This is the E21 Smudge brush, and I always recommend a brush like this. I'm gonna go into the matte chocolate brown right here, and I'm gonna go over top of my eyeliner. So wherever I put that pencil, I'm just gonna go over top and kind of deepen that up a little bit. And it seems like using like a dark shadow over top of the eyeliner will not only kind of give it a smoky effect, but it'll also make it last much longer than the pencil will alone. I'm gonna first grab this shade right here, which is kind of that lightest peachy shade. I'm gonna grab this brush from the Sonia G Sky Set. This is the flat definer brush. And I'm gonna put this on dry first, and we're gonna see what it will look like. Oh my gosh, the shade is flippin' amazing. It's kind of got a peach base, but it's definitely got more of a champagne undertone. It might look peachy in the pan, but when you put it on and start blending it out, it kind of turns into like more of a yellow, like champagne shade, and it's beautiful. So I'm gonna kind of take the brush and tip it, and I'm gonna bring that up into the crease a little bit. That will really open up the eye when you bring any type of shimmer up into the crease. I'm gonna use my felt tip applicator just to get a little bit more of an impact. So what I like to do is I like to take my felt tip applicator. This is the Huda Beauty Fender Blender. And I like to squeeze the applicator with like a makeup wipe. And then I pick up the product and go in, and it'll kind of give you the finger like application without having to use the finger. Because I have nails, it's really hard to get a nice placement when it comes to shimmers. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the smudge brush, and I'm gonna go into that dark chocolate brown, this one right here, and I'm gonna smudge that line one more time. Kind of build that up just a little bit, just so that it's a little bit smoky at the base. I'm gonna grab this olive tone right here, which is stunning. Now going back into that light tone, just to kind of blend it into the crease. Then I'm gonna go back into the smudge brush and go right over top and get that line back. So I'm gonna mix between this matte and this olive tone. So I'm gonna dip my brush into the matte brown and then dip into the olive tone, the middle one. Start blending this into the outer corner. Then I'm gonna grab the matte tone or the matte brown alone and go right over top of it and kind of buff that in. Okay, so I went ahead and popped on some concealer, and as you can see, I just took the corner of my wipe like this. I put my finger into my makeup wipe, and then I just kind of sharpened up that line. So now let's move on to the lower lash line, and then I'll kind of connect everything together. I'm gonna grab this pencil from Refer. This is the number 2. And I'm gonna grab this shade right here, and I'm gonna start kind of softly buffing that into the lash line. Okay, so now I'm gonna go into the dark matte shade. Kind of like smoke that out. Okay, I'm gonna grab this Refer brush right here. This is the number 3. I'm gonna grab this last shade in the palette that we put on the eyelid, and I'm gonna bring that on my inner corner, kind of highlight my inner corner with that. And then I'm also gonna bring that right on the brow bone. Now I kind of still have that line right there that I just can't get out. And the more that I kind of keep messing with it, I feel like the more I'm gonna move those shadows around, and it's just gonna be what it is. For some reason, it just attached to that part of my eyeshadow. I don't know if it attached to my base. I did set my base with powder though. So I used the P. Louise eyeshadow base and I set it with some, actually I set it with my Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Airbrush Flawless Finishing Powder. So I'm not exactly sure why it's stuck there, but on the other look, I'm gonna, you know, use that shade and see if it does the same thing. Last thing I wanna do is go over this one more time with my pencil, just to make sure it's kind of nice and dark right there at the base. Okay, so this is the final look. I just went ahead and threw on a pair of lashes. I actually grabbed a pair from Scott Barnes that I bought the other day. These are the falsettos, this one right here. I will link a link to them in the description box. They're actually really pretty. You have to cut quite a bit off. They come really long, but I actually really like the way these look and they're very comfortable. So nice lashes, pretty decent quality as well. So that's it for look number one. Let's go ahead and jump into look number two. So for this look, I'm going to start directly with the dark, but before I do anything, I'm going to grab the brush that I used to set my eyeshadow base with, and I'm going to go into my Charlotte Tilbury powder and just make sure that everything is set down, because I had that issue with it sticking on this side. I still have that line that I just can't get out. I can't get it out, and you can kind of see it looks a little bit, you know, doesn't look as blended as I prefer. But so on this side, I want to make sure that this is nice and set down, just so that I don't have any problems with it sticking. I want to see how this matte shade right here will build as far as intensity. So can you go in with a little bit and kind of build it from there? Like, or is it just extremely dark and then you have to work really hard to build it? So I'm kind of curious. Plus I want to see what the undertone of the shade is. I'm going to use my Rephr number 13 brush. I went ahead and wiped it off. I'm going to go into this matte brown shade right here. Now I started with a little bit so that I could control, you know, how much is applied, and I can also control how much I blend out. So I'm going to go in for a second time, and I'm going to focus majority of the second dip here on this outer corner. Now I'm kind of just taking the sides of the brush and kind of pulling the shadow up into the crease. That's always a nice trick, just to kind of take the side of the brush and pull the shadow and drag it. I'm going to go in for a third dip, and I'm going to concentrate this here on this outer corner, and I'm just kind of doing the tapping motions. I'm kind of tapping and blending. So that builds really nice, and I'm really not having any problems with it getting a line. You can still see that line right here that really bugs me. Like if I wanted to get really detailed, I would probably go in with like a brush like this and kind of place that dark shade right there and kind of try to blend it. But you know, I've kind of moved on from it. But on this side, I'm not getting that. Like I'm getting, you know, it's buffing out nicely, it's building nicely, and I'm able to, you know, place the shadow where I want it, and it blends right out. So I do like this shade. I am going to take my Builder Pro from Sonia G. I'm going to go into the dark shade. Grab my pencil, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did on the other side. I'm just going to put this right at the base of my lashes. And I'm also going to put it on the upper waterline. Created a wing as well on this side. So I'm going to grab that smudger brush. I'm going to go into the matte brown. the dark brown, and I'm gonna go directly over top of it, just like we did in the last look. Now I'm gonna grab this bronzy shade right here. It's a beautiful cool tone bronzy shade. It's beautiful. And I'm gonna use my felt tip applicator, so I'm gonna dampen it with my makeup wipe. That's a really pretty bronzy shade. Okay, I'm gonna grab some of that shade and put it here on the tip of this brush. And I'm just gonna kind of pounce it over top of this matte here on this outer corner, just to kind of bring some of that shimmer into the crease. Now I'm just bringing it all over because that shade is beautiful. Okay, so now I'm gonna take the brown eyeliner that I was using earlier, and I'm gonna go right at the base of my lashes on the lower lash line, and I'm also gonna bring it up on the waterline as well. Then I'm gonna grab that little tiny smudge brush and just kind of smudge it in. I think I'm gonna grab this shade right here. It's that olive toned shade. And I'm gonna put some here, and I'm just gonna kind of buff that into that eyeliner. And then I'm gonna wipe that brush off, and I'm gonna go into the matte brown and put that right at the base of the lashes over top of the eyeliner. So this is the final look for look number 2, and I think it turned out really pretty. I love that shimmer shade in the crease. I think it was a really nice addition, and then putting the olive green shimmer shade on the lower lash line just kind of tied it all together. So I think it turned out really pretty. I do really like it, and yeah, I think it's a good look. That's it for look number 2. Let's go ahead and jump into the swatches, and then I will get into my final thoughts. Okay, so now that we got through the swatches, before I get into my final thoughts, I wanted to just mention something that you guys just saw in the swatches. So I swatched this shade right here on the end, which is so unique. It's so pretty. Like all of her little mini palettes have one shade that has a little bit of glitter in it to really give the impact. And in the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette, I swatched it next to these two shades right here, as you saw in the swatches. And it's very similar to those shades, but also different. Even though in the image it looked almost exact, it's still like these two do not have the shimmering like glitter effect. I can't say glitter. It's not like chunky glitter. It's just like micro glitter effect that this shade has. So it's somewhat similar to the shades in here, but not quite, even though it looks that way in the swatches. However, once you put it on the eye, I doubt it's going to be that different. So you also have to keep that in mind. But as far as this palette goes, I really like this palette. I actually really like this palette. This will be a palette that I will reach for quite often because I have loved these, especially for traveling. I've really, really enjoyed these, but I really like the shades in here. I think all of the shades are beautiful. The only thing I would have changed is I wish that this shade was a little bit darker. I feel like it just doesn't have enough pigment to work for a medium to deeper skin tone. If you have more fair or light skin, I think this shade will be a nice transition for you. Because the reason why I say that is even though this shade right here in like the Mini Nudes and also in the Mini Star, this one right here, I was able to build this shade and it gave me a little bit of dimension. So even though it looked lighter in the pan, it went on the eye and gave me a little bit of something. This shade, on the other hand, just doesn't really give you a lot. With all of that said, I would have preferred it to be a little bit darker. However, I understand why it's in the palette, just so that you can use that to make more of an olive look. And so if you're gonna use this olive shade here in the middle, that, you know, putting this shade down first and then going over top of it with this is perfect, because it will give you the olive undertone that you need to match this middle shade. For that reason, I actually like that it's in here. You can see the difference between the depth of both of these eyeshadow looks in the crease. This one is definitely much deeper and much of a brown undertone. This one has an olive tone to it. So the shade's in there for a reason, and it's very usable, and I didn't have any issues with this dark brown on this side, so there must have been something, you know, with maybe the way I applied my eyeshadow primer. I'm not sure, because normally my eyeshadow primer goes on very smooth, and especially if I put something over top. Now, it also could have been, so it might have grabbed onto this shade just a little bit weird, and I just struggled to blend it out. I'm not exactly sure, because on this side, not using the shade underneath it, it worked perfectly fine. So, you know, I just know that I love all the shimmers in here, and even though I would have preferred this to be a little bit darker, I understand the purpose of it in the palette, and it's very usable for those olive green type of eyeshadow looks. And also, I think it pairs well with some of these little minis. So if you're like me, that's the reason why I swatched this palette next to the other 3 minis that I have, in case you guys are like me and you have these minis. So you could see what this mini will look like next to some of your other minis that you have and mix and match. I love mixing and matching some of these shadows. This will really pair nicely with this Mini Star, because they're both kind of a cooler toned type of palette. And you know, I think you have a nice little family here. I really do. These are going to be paired well, and I personally would rather have these minis than the bigger palettes all day long. As you guys know, I reviewed the Metropolis palette, and it wasn't my favorite palette. I have tried to use this palette so many times, but some of these cream to matte formulas in here are very hard for me to use as far as the matte shades go. And I just don't love it. I don't love it. And I also don't love how some of the shades in this Metropolis palette, as far as shimmers go, have become a little bit hard panned. And I don't know. I just much prefer her minis over the larger pans, and that's just my personal preference. I'm so glad I have it in my collection, and for $25 I definitely think it's worth it. Now, you don't get a lot of product with these. We all know that Natasha Denona is pretty expensive. You do pay more money per gram with the smaller palettes than you do with the larger palettes. But for me, I'm okay with paying that because I really do love her shimmers. I think her shimmers are really pretty. 9 times out of 10, I prefer the mattes that she puts in these smaller palettes over the mattes that she puts in the larger palettes. For some reason, the mattes that are in these smaller palettes work so much better for me. These blend so much easier for me than the mattes that are in the larger palettes. So for me personally, it's just like a no-brainer, but I love it. I think it's a great palette. So that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for the love that you have shown me and my channel. It means so much to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day filled with love and joy. I will see you guys in my next video, and I love you all so much. Bye.